Hello students. So let's start with the topic of today's session, and to begin with, typically as I have a method of running through. Okay, so Anu, hello, Anu,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
are you able to see the presentation and hear me also?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Perfect. Okay. Because I am asking Rakesh, I guess he is not responding, maybe, but okay, you are able to see, right? So the setting is done perfectly then.
Yes.
Fine. So we'll begin with the today's topic. Luckily, in the last session we ended up with the module 3, and today we'll start with module 4, which is about enterprise risk management. And weightage wise, if you see, I don't know why the humming is coming. Weightage wise, it has a 15% weightage for this module. So there are 3 chapters in this. One is about risk management, second is about corporate risk management, and third is about corporate failure. So let's start with risk management. The chapter per se, if you go through the module, it's a bit lengthy and might not be able to finish in today's session. So maybe this particular chapter may require one more session. But let's see how it begins and how I am able to finish. So in risk management, obviously, for strategic performance, there is always a risk, financial risk that is involved. So let's understand what is a financial risk or risk in finance. A crucial concept for business managers to understand before measuring and managing it. So just a second, why is this humming coming up? Hello. 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 Yeah. So risk in finance, a crucial concept for business managers to understand before measuring and managing it. To have an overview, typically the entire overview of this module is introduction to the meaning of risk and exploring the various developments that are happening in risk management. Key definition of risk by CIMA in 2005 was done. So risk is a quantified dispersion in possible outcomes classified in multiple ways, and International Federation of Accountants Committee has identified risk in 1991 as risk involves uncertain future events that may affect an organization's strategic, operational and financial goals. So these are the key definitions in terms of what is meant by risk. So prominently, let's understand risk management. So the saying goes in risk management is that measurement before management. So risk must be measured before it can be effectively managed. So what cannot be measured cannot be managed is the famous line of the management guru Peter Drucker. And of course, if you really look into, if something cannot be managed, something which cannot be measured is cannot be managed. So if at all risk measurability is there, then the risk management is possible. That's what the whole perspective would be. So first, we should be able to understand the risks that are likely to be faced by a particular organization. So understanding risk and its key connotations is essential before even discussing risk management. So let's understand what is risk, risk aspects, risk dimensions, etc. So the entire section of this chapter is focused on the conceptualization of risk. So whole chapter is all about understanding what exactly risk means. Sorry. Just a second. Yeah. So to begin with the topic, let's understand first financial risk. So the word financial risk or the concept financial risk was introduced by Frank Knight's 1921 Work, Risk, Uncertainty and Profit book. So before understanding risk, let's understand the distinction between risk and uncertainty. Risk is the probability distribution of outcomes and is known as either a priori or through statistical inference. And uncertainty is the probability of occurrence is unknown. So let's understand this concept by way of a case study which is given in the study material itself. So Tinkuji's decision on selling tea or ice cream. So let's say a businessman, one Mr. Tinkuji is deciding whether to sell tea or ice cream at a fair, or a fair means a typical mela or exhibition that is happening on June 1st, 2023. Over here, profit depends on the weather conditions, sunny and humid versus rainy. So the profit scenarios are typically tea at the rate of rupees 300 if it rains and rupees 30 if sunny and humid, and ice cream will be rupees 150 if sunny and humid and 10 if it rains. So the decision making process involves, which is there, is the weather probabilities derived from historical data last 200 years. Probability of rain is at 0.15 and probability of sunny and humid is 0.85. So in Tinkuji's constructs an expected payoff matrix based on these probabilities. Decision is made using the expected value criterion. So if you see the table, which is a 2 by 2 matrix for the expected value, so the probability of occurrence for and a status of failure. So for hot and humid climate it is 0.85 and for rainy it is 0.15, and in case of if the sale of tea is there, then it's 30 and 100 units, and sale of ice cream will be 150 units or 10. So the expected value on the basis of which the decision is to be taken is given as below. Expected value is equal to the summation of px into x, where px is the probability of occurrence of event I, which is either the sunny or rainy situation, and is the payoff related to the event I. In the given case, the expected value of T is 30 into 0.85 plus 300 into 0.15, that's equal to 17.55, and expected value of ice cream is with the same formula to be of 129. So over here to help Tinkuji's decision on selling tea or ice cream, the decision based on expected payoff will be Tinkuji selects the act with the highest expected payoff, which is 129, and requires knowledge of probability distribution for different states of nature. Such a scenario is classified as decision making under the risk. So decision making under uncertainty occurs when probability distributions of different outcomes are unknown or indeterminable. So this leads to the development of special decision criteria. Laplace Minimax, Savage and Hercules. So these are the decision making criteria for under uncertainty. So in this case study, the risk in business and finance is that the business world often does not distinguish between the risk and uncertainty. In finance, risk is viewed as the probability that a company's net cash flow falls short of the financial obligations. So Markowitz in 1952 developed a model which gave a perspective on risk. So the investment behavior based on expected return desirable versus variance of returns or undesirable. So Markowitz defines risk as the standard deviation of return from a security. So let's see the classification in financial risks now. Classification of financial risk involves risk in business, the extent to which any action or inaction leads to an undesirable outcome. The two broad categories of financial risk involve systematic risk like market risk or non-diversifiable risk, and unsystematic risk, which includes company specific or diversifiable risk. So let's understand the systematic risk. Now in systematic risk, typically the components are those risks which are beyond company's control, especially the interest rate risk. So the changes in market interest rate affects the fixed income securities. Then another category of systematic risk is the market risk, where price variations due to social, political and economic events affects all securities. Purchasing power risk, inflation reduces the real value of returns. Another risk which is there is the foreign exchange risk. Just a second. And the fourth systematic risk is the political risk. So this risk is typically the instability due to war, regulations or government actions affecting the businesses. So unsystematic risk involves company specific or which are under the control of company and can be avoided. So the categories of unsystematic risk are the liquidity risk. So it is difficult in selling assets quickly without price discounts. Then there is another risk called credit risk or the default risk. Failure to meet financial obligations may lead to insolvency. Operational risks, which typically are the errors, system failures and procedural lapses impacting the business operations. So just to give a pictorial or visual categories of these risks for better comprehension is on the next slide. So if we see, the risks are of two types, systematic risk and unsystematic risk. The systematic risk involves the market risk, interest rate risk, foreign exchange risk and fluctuation power or the purchasing power risk. Sorry, a bit. Just a second. Yeah, and the unsystematic risk involves liquidity risk, operational risk and credit risk. So let's understand the risk management process. The importance of risk management. Risk must be identified and managed as it makes decision making uncertain. So because of the uncertainty, there are certain possibilities that the decision may be difficult to be taken, and hence risk must be identified and managed as it makes decision making uncertain. The uncertain future impacts organization strategy and goals. Businesses operates in a VUCA environment. VUCA means volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. So these are the environment within which the businesses are required to be operate. Risk management must continuously evolve to remain effective. So these are the importance of risk management. And then let's understand the key financial risk terms. So first is the likelihood, which means the probability of an event occurring, qualitative, high, medium, low, or quantitative wise percentage or frequency. The impact is the effect of an event or on an entity measured in severity, consequences, and or monetary value. The third term is the risk exposure, which means potential future loss, which is calculated as probability into expected loss. So definition of the risk management by CIMA, that is Certified Institute of Management Accounting in 2005, is a process of understanding and managing risks to achieve corporate objectives. Risk categorized into operational, financial, legal, compliance, information, and personal. So overall, the concept of ERM, which is the Enterprise Risk Management, which is the title of the module also, is an integrated approach to risk management. So risk management cannot be just purely on a particular category of risk only. It has to be holistic, and all these kind of risks that are involved or may be likely faced by the management are to be covered under the enterprise risk management approach. So the next focus area is understanding and managing risk, enterprise risk management as a solution. So let's understand the 5 steps of risk management. So definition wise, identifying, evaluating and prioritizing risk, followed by resource allocation to minimize negative impacts or maximize the opportunities. So the 5 steps that are involved in risk management are identification of the risk. Over here, it is necessary to recognize and categorize the risk within the organization. Thereafter, the next step would be analyzing the risk per se. So evaluating probability of likelihood of that particular risk to happen, the amount of risk that may happen, so the magnitude and the impact using financial and operational metrics on the organization. Then comes prioritizing the risk. So ranking the risk determines the area to be focused for mitigation. The another step or the important step is about the risk mitigation, that is mitigating the risk. So taking steps to eliminate or reduce the risk impact on the organization. And fifth major step is the risk monitoring, monitoring the risk. So continuous evaluation and communication with the stakeholders is essential. And so in a way, these are the 5 steps of risk management. Now let's understand the CIMA's risk management framework. So the first is risk assessment. This includes identifying and categorizing the risk, structuring risk descriptions, estimating risk likelihood and impact using tools like Monte Carlo simulation, decision trees, sensitivity analysis, etc. And thereafter maintaining a risk register for tracking the various risks. The second step involved in the risk management framework of CIM is the risk management policy. So over here, defining the organization's risk appetite and approach to handling the risk. The third aspect is the risk response. So 4 strategies to address the risks are risk avoidance, risk sharing, risk reduction also at the same time. I guess some visuals have got impacted. The PPT seems to be so the 4 strategies that are involved in risk response are the risk avoidance, risk reduction, risk sharing or risk transfer, and risk acceptance. Now let's understand what is meant by risk avoidance. So in a way, stopping activities that may lead to risk. Risk reduction means implementing certain controls to reduce the risk probability or the impact. Risk sharing or transfer means using mechanisms like insurance, outsourcing or hedging risk. Risk acceptance involves taking no action if the risk is within acceptable limits. The fourth aspect in the risk management framework of CIMA is the risk reporting. In this, there are 2 types of risk reporting. One is the external reporting. Some companies voluntarily disclose risk management strategies. So Indian laws like Companies Act 2013 and requires certain disclosures. So to be precise, the internal finance control, if at all any finance risk is involved in the internal finance control, then that is required to be reported in the CARO. Then another category of another type of reporting is the internal reporting. Over here, it is ensured that the stakeholders have risk related information for decision making. And third category is the residual risk reporting. So the residual risk reporting means comparing gross risk before controls with the net risk after controls to assess effectiveness and identify the future actions. So objectives of risk management: prepare the firm for potential losses in a cost effective way, reduce anxiety and uncertainty regarding unmitigated risks, comply with legal obligations related to risk management, ensure business continuity post loss, allowing partial or full operations to resume, and maintaining earnings per share by minimizing the financial disruption. So these are the objectives of risk management. Now let's compare the traditional risk management with the enterprise risk management, which is supposed to be the modern world method of managing the risk. So traditional risk management involved a silo based approach or a stovepipe approach where different business functions managed risk independently. So it was silo based approach. So each department had to manage their own functional risks independently. Again, each department head or the silo leader is responsible for managing the risk within their domain. For example, marketing manager was required to manage risk related to sales and customer relationship. Finance manager was required to manage the financing and cash flow risk. The chief operating officer or the CEO was responsible to manage risk related to production and distribution. So there, in this traditional risk management approach lacked cross-functional coordination, leading to risk oversight gaps and inefficiencies. To overcome all these challenges, the modern approach of enterprise risk management, not explicitly mentioned in the provided text but implied as an alternative, was required to be adopted. So ERM is a holistic integrated approach to risk management across the organization. Risks are viewed collectively rather than in silos. And over here, the encouragement is given to a collaborative and centralized risk oversight to improve strategic decision making, often led by a chief risk officer or a chief ERM manager also. So he has a designated risk management team which ensures that the entire all probable risks that are likely to be hit or hitting the organization are forecasted by such ERM manager, and in a way the mitigation plans are put in place by this kind of a ERM or the chief risk officer. So in a way this is the dashboard for managing the various ERM risks. So one is the finance and treasury, second is about the production and distribution, third is about the human resources, fourth is about sales and customer services, fifth is the legal and compliance, and sixth is the technology risk. So within each of the bucket, the respective risks are required to be mentioned with the order of preference. The limitations of traditional risk management, let's understand the risk gaps between silos. Some risks do not fit merely into specific departments, leading to unnoticed risks until a major event occurs. There are certain overlapping risks also. So some risks affect multiple departments, but silo leaders may fail to assess the cumulative impact across the organization. Isolated risk responses. A risk response in the one department may trigger risk in another, leading to unintended consequences. Limited external focus. So traditional risk management often ignored external risks such as competitor actions or market disruptions. Weak connection to the strategy. Risk management efforts were often not aligned with the strategic planning, reducing their effectiveness. And hence, because of these limitations of gap between the silos, overlapping of risk, isolated risk responses, limited external focuses, and weak connection to the strategy, the focus of entire risk management shifted to enterprise risk management. So in enterprise risk management, holistic approach is adopted. ERM integrates risk management across the entire organization, ensuring all risks are considered collectively, holistically. So in ERM, there is always a proactive strategy which is thought of. ERM helps organizations anticipate and manage risks before they become critical issues. So it's a proactive approach and proactive strategy. So in ERM, there is always a alignment of the risk management activities with the business objectives, making it a valuable strategic tool for decision making. So thus ERM supports the strategic goals. So in a way, now let's start deep diving into ERM. So elements of enterprise risk management are or involves strategy or objective stating. So here the expectations are that the one has to understand the business strategies and their associated risks. Second element is the risk identification. So develop a risk profile of major threats affecting the company's financials. Third element is the risk assessment. So analyze risks based on their likelihood and impact magnitude.
पाण्याची बाकी देशील का सायन्सच्या दिवसामध्ये
Fourth element is the communication and monitoring. Continuously monitor and share risk related information across all levels, because it is a holistic approach. There has to be a good communication and knowledge sharing that should be adopted. So ERM is an ongoing process that continuously identifies, assesses, responds to and monitors the risk. A strong ERM framework integrates value creation by aligning risk management with the company's strategic goals. So there was this COSO framework which came into existence for enterprise risk management. So there it was developed by a committee of sponsoring organizations, COSO. This framework provides an approach for identifying, analyzing, responding to and monitoring the risks, supported by CIMA and widely used globally. So let's understand this COSO framework here on. So the risk response strategy includes avoidance, reduction and transfer and acceptance. Avoidance means eliminating activities associated with high risks. Reduction means minimizing the likelihood or impact of risk. Transfer includes sharing or outsourcing a portion of the risk, which is the classic example of insurance. And acceptance means taking no action when the cost of mitigation exceeds benefits. Monitoring and internal control. So over here it is expected that the analytical reports will be monitoring will be implemented, and monitoring and internal control will be conducted through analytical reports, committee meetings and expert reviews to track its effectiveness. Value creation focus. So here it ensures an optimal balance between the risk and return goals. So these are the characteristics of this COSO framework. So evolution. So in 2004 initial COSO ERM framework was introduced. In 2017 update published was given, integrating with strategy and performance to clarify the misconceptions that were emerging in 2004. So the misconceptions about ERM which was clarified in 2017 COSO document was not a function or department. So ERM was never considered as a function or a department. It was always an inherent part of each and every functional department. So ERM per se was never considered as an independent function as such. So in 2017 ERM was propagated to be an independent function who will be monitoring as a third party over the rest of the functions. Rather than sitting into a particular function, it was separately monitoring each and every functional departments in the organization. So a third by view, and majorly at times this ERM function was sitting into the internal audit department. So internal audit was always taking care of the enterprise risk management, but even then furthermore progress happened that internal audit was separated and ERM was separated out. So this is how the evolution happened of the enterprise risk management. So ERM is a culture, capability and practice integrated with strategy setting. More than risk listing, it is broader than just inventorying the risks. It includes active risk management practices beyond internal control. So ERM encompasses strategy, governance, stakeholder communication and performance measurement across all levels. It's just not merely a checklist, it is a set of guiding principles for building and improving risk management processes. And more importantly, the misconception about ERM which was there, which was clarified in 2017, that it is applicable to all organizations. So ERM applies to any organization who has a mission, strategy and decision making processes that involve risks. So definition of ERM focused on the negative impacts of events as risks that prevent value creation and erode existing value. Positive impacts counterbalance negative impacts and represent opportunities. ERM is a process driven by the board, management and personnel across the organization. It is applied in strategy setting and enterprise-wide decision making. It aims to identify potential risks that could affect the entity. It ensures risks remain within the organization's risk appetite, and ERM provides reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of organizational objectives. The key aspects of ERM or the integrated framework which was given in 2004. It's an ongoing process. ERM is a continuous process applicable to all aspects of the organization, managed by the experts. Those closest to the risk situation must handle risk management to understand its implications. Strategic integration. So ERM is an essential part of the strategy setting. Enterprise-wide risk approach. ERM applies across the entire organization and takes a portfolio view of risk at the entity level. Proactive risk identification is the key aspect of ERM. Over here, ERM identifies potential risk events and aligns them with the organization's risk tolerance. Alternative to silo-based traditional risk management. So ERM in a way addresses cross-functional risk also that traditional silo risk management failed to capture. So these are the various key aspects of integrated framework of ERM. It is an ongoing process, expert managed, strategic integration, enterprise-wide approach, proactive risk identification, and it is a alternative to silo-based risk management approach. Now let's understand the COSO framework. So there are 4 categories of entity objectives. One set is the strategic objectives, high-level objectives aligned with the entity's mission. Operations is the second category, focuses on effective and efficient use of resources. Third category is the reporting, ensures reliable and accurate reporting. And fourth is the compliance. So over here compliance in a way addresses adherence to applicable laws and regulations. So managing risk across these categories within the entity's risk appetite helps create stakeholder value. So the COSO framework, integrated framework 2004 model establishes a direct relationship between the 4 objectives, that is strategic, operations, reporting and compliance, and the 8 components involved are internal environment, objective setting, event identification, risk assessment, risk response, control activities, information and communication, and last but not least is monitoring. The third dimension represents the interrelationship of objectives and components across various entity levels. So this is how the COSO ERM model in a way looks like. So these are the 8 components spread across the 4 categories which are identified for the organization. So now let's understand the risk pooling. So pooling of risk in insurance. So risk pooling is means minimizing cost impact by grouping individuals, spreading financial risk across a larger base. Common in health care, home and life insurance. Ensuring coverage for high risk individuals is balanced by low risk individuals. It helps insurers manage the premium spiraling, preventing adverse selection where only high risk individuals opt for coverage. So thereby this stabilizes the premium, balances the cost between healthy and unhealthy individuals to maintain affordability. So this is all about the pooling of risk in insurance. So pooling of risk in supply chain management. How the pooling of risk can be done in supply chain management? The inventory risk pooling reduces demand variability by aggregating demand across products, locations or time. The key benefits of pooling of risk in supply chain management are that better inventory management, it reduces the safety stock, lowering obsolescence risk, warehousing location and product flow. So it encourages strategic decentralization while considering customer proximity. Transportation reduces the transportation cost by consolidating the shipments. And product design, so it simplifies forecasting by limiting product variations. So pooling of risk in supply chain management, I think it's a double PPT, I guess so. Yeah, sorry. So pooling has a positive and negative impacts of risk pooling. Let's understand the positive impact. So by pooling, there is an increased service level, reduced overhead and safety stock cost, and improved operational efficiency. These are the positives of pooling of risk. The negative impacts are that higher transportation costs due to increased distance. At times it leads to longer lead times and limited alternatives in case of disruptions. Risk diversification. So let's understand risk diversification. Introduction. Diversification is a risk management strategy used by investors to minimize risk by spreading investments across multiple asset classes and industries. So if at all one has to diversify the financial risk, the investor should always adopt investing into various multiple asset classes or multiple industries. So based on the principle of not putting all eggs in one basket is the base of risk diversification. A well diversified portfolio reduces exposure to individual assets, risks and is relevant for retail investors, mutual funds and corporate treasury functions. So the type of risks that are involved are unsystematic risk, firm risk, specific risk, risk unique to a specific company or industry. Example, faulty credit evaluation in a housing finance company. So the classic example of housing finance company credit failure is the subprime crisis. So in 2007-8, the Lehman Brothers collapse happened because of the subprime crisis, because the housing loan that were given were of the poor quality, no proper credit evaluation was done. At the same time, the bad loans which turned out to be could not be recovered, because at the same time the real estate market also collapsed. So there was a depression in real estate market in US, and therefore it led to the subprime crisis, thereby downfall of the Lehman Brothers happened. So this is how the specific company or industry risk may arise. So faulty credit evaluation in a housing finance company, it can be eliminated through diversification by investing in multiple securities. So unsystematic risk, also known as diversifiable risk or unique risk or idiosyncratic risk. A well diversified portfolio of 25 to 30 securities provide the most cost effective risk reduction. So systematic risk again involves market risk. So these risks are the risks which are affected by the entire market and cannot be diversified away, arises from economic factors impacting all businesses. Example, inflation, yeah, so some alignment has got changed to some extent, or copy pasting has happened actually. Yeah, systematic risk affects the entire market and cannot be diversified away. arises from economic factors impacting all businesses, example inflation, interest rate, political instability. It explains why even diversified portfolios remain exposed to market-wide fluctuations. So mathematics of portfolio diversification was introduced by Harry Markowitz in 1952 through its modern portfolio theory, that is MPT. It quantifies how correlations between the investments reduces the overall portfolio risk. So in such model, the correlation range from -1 to +1. Negative correlation means -1, ideal for diversification as losses in one investment are offset by gains in another. Positive correlation means +1, no diversification benefit as such in this model. So the essence of diversification: portfolio managers select securities that are negatively correlated to minimize overall risk. As more negatively correlated assets are added, portfolio risk decreases but never reaches zero due to systematic risk. Total risk is equal to systematic risk plus unsystematic risk. Adding more securities reduces unsystematic risk but does not affect the systematic risk. There is a limit to diversification benefits because of systematic risk remains. The key takeaways in diversification are that the diversification reduces portfolio risk but cannot eliminate systematic risk. A well-diversified portfolio includes 25 to 30 securities, achieves optimal risk reduction. Negative correlation between assets is crucial for effective diversification, and the diversification does not remove market-wide risks like recessions or interest rate changes. So let's get to so we saw risk pooling, which is the classic example of insurance, and then we saw risk diversification. Now let's understand risk analysis. So risk analysis is the assessment of potential risk in a project, examining their probability and consequences. It helps in prioritizing risk factors that can significantly impact a project schedule, cost and quality. The benefits of risk analysis are: it avoids potential litigation, it addresses to the regulatory compliances, it ensures adherence to new legislation, it reduces the exposure to risk and minimizes potential negative impacts, it aids decision making at all project management stages. The methods of risk analysis includes qualitative methods based on judgment and experience, used when data is insufficient for quantitative analysis. It helps prioritize high impact risk. The common techniques that are involved are brainstorming with the experts, or structured interviews and questionnaires, and expert judgments, which is called as Delphi technique. So because it's a qualitative method based on the judgment and experience of a particular expert, the risk can be in a way analyzed. There is a semi-quantitative method, risk classification between high, medium, low. So it uses scales and descriptions to assess likelihood and impact, helps avoid misinterpretation of results. The quantitative methods are assigning numerical value to risk, helps in creating realistic cost, schedule and target projections. Common techniques are likelihood analysis, impact consequence analysis and computer simulations, example Monte Carlo method. So these are the risk analysis and tools and techniques. So bow tie analysis, over here it identifies the causes and consequences of risk, helps create a risk mitigation strategy. Then there is a risk analysis matrix which classifies risk based on the likelihood and severity and prioritizes the risk for effective mitigation. Third technique is the risk register, document all potential risks during project execution and thereafter specify responsibilities and mitigation strategies. And SWIFT, that is called as structured what if technique, identifies risks associated with project changes. What if a particular change happens, then what will be the risk that will be there. that kind of a technique is used. This uses structured brainstorming to assess the possible risks that could be eventually be faced in a particular project. So another technique is the Monte Carlo simulation. So quantitative risk analysis, a probability based model that evaluates risk and uncertainty, randomly assigns values to variables to generate different risk scenarios. The key features are it performs multiple iterations to simulate real life risk, provides statistical insights like mean, variance, standard deviation, and widely used as financial risk management and portfolio analysis. The risk analysis tools and techniques, the key takeaway is that risk analysis help in proactive risk management. It combines qualitative and quantitative methods, ensuring the accuracy. Monte Carlo simulation is a powerful tool for risk-based decision making. A structured approach ensures risks are prioritized and mitigated effectively. Now let's see the risk mapping process. The risk mapping is a key component of risk assessment. It visually represents potential risks based on impact and probability. Helps top management prioritize risk for mitigation or acceptance. The key aspects of risk mapping involves identification, quantification and prioritization the risks affecting organizational objectives. Uses a two-dimensional matrix. Y-axis includes frequency, likelihood of occurrence, and x-axis represents severity or the impact if it occurs. This risk mapping helps in decision making on which risks to assume or hedge. So this is how the map looks like. On the y-axis, it is the likelihood of occurrence, that is the frequency it may happen. Then the impact severity or impact severity. So classified into moderate risk, high risk, low risk, and medium risk. So this is the way the risk mapping is done. So each kind of risk is in a way put into these 4 buckets depending on the severity and the frequency of or likelihood of occurrence that is going to happen. So this is called as risk mapping. The risk categorization is based on the risk map. So high the risk, high the likelihood plus a high the impact. Low risk is low likelihood plus low impact. Medium risk is high likelihood but low impact. Low likelihood, high impact. So the risk response is based on assessment is to avoid eliminating activities that expose the organization to high risk. Those activities should be avoided. Mitigate means implementing strategies to reduce the risk impact or frequency. Transfer means shifting risk to third parties, example insurance. Accept is acknowledging the risk and bearing the consequences if it occurs. This structured assessment helps organizations effectively manage and prioritize their risks. So risk categorization based on the risk map is as follows. So identification or indications of the risk map and the risk response. So the low the risk, accept the risk, which means low risk means low impact and low likelihood of occurrence, accept that risk. High risk means high impact and high likelihood of occurrence, start mitigating and controlling that risk. Medium risk means high impact but low likelihood of occurrence, then in that case control the risk. And medium risk means low impact but high likelihood of occurrence. In that case, the risk should be transferred or shared. So this is how risk mapping is done. So let's understand the importance of risk mapping. Understanding the risk environment, which means creating a risk register listing all organizational risks, categorizing the various risks based on the causes and consequences, provides a comprehensive view of risk frequencies and severities. It acts as a simple visual tool for understanding overall risk. The second usage or importance of risk mapping is that it prioritizes the mitigation strategy. It helps allocate the limited resources effectively. It helps identifying high impact risks that need to be paid attention immediately, and it enables strategic planning to minimize the potential harm. Third importance is the reduction in the insurance cost. So it demonstrates structured risk management to insurers, helps negotiate favorable insurance premiums. It encourages proactive risk control to lower the claims. So these are other aspects of risk mapping. It enhances collaboration between the risk function and other departments. It encourages strategic decision making based on the risk factors. Risk mapping improves risk management or overall governance effectiveness. Risk mapping clarifies risk appetite and tolerance for the enterprise. It integrates risk management activities across all functions and provides a common risk language for better communication. So these are the various other benefits of risk mapping. Now let's understand the risk mapping process. So visual tool, risk mapping is a structured visual approach used by large organizations. Risk register creation, risk manager presents a top 10 risk in a tabular format. Risk assessment, each risk is assessed for initial severity before mitigation and residual risk after mitigation. Color coding is used. Risks are categorized using red, orange, green to indicate severity levels. Heat map plotting is also used. The top 10 risks are visually represented on a heat map. Risk categorization is done. Green and turquoise blue zone, low moderate risk, requires minimal focus. Orange zone means medium risk, requires specific attention. Red zone means high risk, demands immediate focus from top management. And decision making helps top executive prioritize the risk management efforts or risk mitigation efforts. These are the disadvantages. So these are the advantages of risk mapping process, and these are the disadvantages in a way. Subjectivity in scoring, probability and impact scores are imprecise, inflexible, relative, leading to inconsistencies to risk classification. Inability to differentiate probabilities, unlikely risks with high impact may have similar probability scores, making it difficult to distinguish between them. Simultaneously, lack of multidimensional representation. So risk impacts, financial, environmental, injuries, delays, etc. cannot be consistently represented without a quantitative scale. There are scaling issues in this risk mapping. Financial loss may be very high for a small business but very low for a large corporate entity. The importance of risk, example, loss of life should remain constant regardless of the project size. So life is precious. So regardless of the project size, life risk or risk of life or loss of life is always to be given topmost priority and should remain constant. The third disadvantage is that of risk mapping is that it lacks cost effectiveness evaluation. Without quantitative evaluations, businesses cannot assess the effectiveness of risk mitigation strategies, leading to potential competitive disadvantage. Now let's understand. So we have been hearing key performance indicators. Now at times performance management involves identifying the risk indicators also and managing the key risk indicators. So let's understand what are meant by risk indicators. So risk indicators are those indicators which help monitor and mitigate the risk within the risk management framework. The KRIs or key risk indicators are the most important risk indicators focusing on critical risks that can significantly impact on organization. KRIs act as the early warning signals allowing proactive risk mitigation. So the importance of KRIs, not all risks are equally important. KRIs focus on high impact risks. KRIs vary by business type, objectives and time. What was key last year may not be key this year. So KRIs have to be continuously updated also at the same time and are more relevant to a particular period. The KRIs work alongside loss events, risk assessment and other data to identify weaknesses in the risk controls. The functions of effective KRIs is to identify major risks, quantify risk and their impact, provide comparison and benchmarks. It facilitates regular risk reporting and monitoring. It gives alert, it alerts the key stakeholders in advance of potential risk and supports risk management and mitigation strategies. Now let's understand the KRIs versus KPI. KPIs are the key performance indicators. So KPIs measure business performance, example revenue growth, staff engagement, whereas KRIs measure the risk exposure, example cyber attack, vulnerability, market share decline, etc. Example comparison, IT performance is a KPI, whereas cyber attack risk is a KRI. Market share growth is a KPI, whereas the risk of losing customers is a KRI, sorry. Staff engagement is a KPI and risk of losing key employees is a KRI. The features of KRIs are that it should be measurable, quantified through numbers, percentages or ratios. They should be predictive, act as early warning signals or indicators, tracking risk trends, and informative. They should be able to provide insights for strategic decision making. The type of KRIs that can be categorized per se are financial KRIs, wherein risk is measured like economic downturns or regulatory changes. The people KRI includes tracking employee satisfaction, staff turnover and customer churn. Operational KRI would include monitoring the risks such as IT failures or security breaches. The effectiveness of the KRIs. So KRIs should align with KPIs and strategic goals. Each KRI should be linked to a KPI performance measure, specific, predictive and quantifiable. In order that the KRI should be effective, there should be a continuous regular monitoring. Some require real-time tracking and others periodic reviews. So KRIs and KPIs should be reviewed regularly for continued relevance. So in order to be effective KRIs, so this is how KRI should be talking with KPIs. So KPI should be in sync with the KRIs also. Each KRI should be linked with the KPI, that is the performance measure. And therefore KRIs and KPIs should be reviewed regularly for continued relevance. So in a way, we are done with the chapter because it's all theoretical, strategic risk management especially. So just to do a recap of the entire topic, I'll quickly browse through what we covered in the today's session. So we started, so these are the three concepts which are covered in the module 4 ERM, risk management. So we saw what is meant by risk management and how the definition of risk management has been done by CIMA and IFAC. Obviously risk management can be done provided the risk is measured, and how the measurement can be done we saw up to KRIs also, key risk indicators. Then we saw the various risks, financial risks and the distinction between risk and uncertainty. There is a confusion always in the minds of management whether uncertainty means a risk. So we saw a decision making problem about Tinkuji's, whether he should go for selling tea or ice cream and how it can be solved by way of expected value and the various decision process expected on the based on the expected payoff and decision making under uncertainty. So in the similar case, what is the risk in business and finance? And then we saw Markowitz's perspective on the risk also. We saw risk in business and the two broad categories of financial risk, which involve systematic risk, especially the market risk and non-diversifiable risk, and then the unsystematic risk, which includes company specific or diversifiable risk. So in systematic risk, which are beyond company's control, included interest rate risk, market risk, purchasing power risk, foreign exchange risk and political risk. So if you see, all these risks are beyond the control of company. The company cannot do anything about it, but needs to be measured and also anticipated and have steps to mitigate the impact of these systematic risks. The unsystematic risks, which are company specific and can be controllable, are the liquidity risks. So liquidity risk means difficulty in selling assets quickly without price discount. So if at all there is a potential liquidity risk, then at times the company will have to take a call saying the asset should be sold at a discount, get out of the liquidity crunch, and that's how it is controllable within the hands of the management. Credit risk, obviously, failure to meet financial obligations may lead to insolvency. Operational risk involves errors, system failures, and procedural lapses impacting business operations. So this was the categorization of the financial risks. Then we saw various importance of risk management. So risk must be identified, managed as it's making decision making uncertain. Thereafter we saw that all businesses operate in a VUCA environment, volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous, and hence risk management is a very crucial aspect to the businesses to survive through this VUCA environment. Risk management must continuously evolve to remain effective. We saw then key financial risk terms: likelihood, impact and risk exposure. Thereafter we went through the definition of risk management by CIMA, that is CIMA 2005, which is a process of understanding and managing the risk to achieve corporate objectives. The risk categorization involved operational, financial, legal, compliance and information and personnel. So ARM is an integrated approach to risk management wherein all these categories of risk are covered. So the focus areas in risk management are always understanding and managing the risk, so for which enterprise risk management is a solution. The 5 key steps that were involved in risk management were identification of risk, analyzing the risk, prioritizing the risk and mitigating the risk, and thereafter monitoring the risk on a continuous basis. We saw CIMA's risk management framework also, which included risk assessment, risk management policy, then the risk response, which included risk avoidance, risk reduction, risk sharing, risk transfer and acceptance of risk. Risk reporting, which included external reporting, internal reporting, residual risk reporting. We saw few objectives of the risk management, which are essentially making the firm prepared for potential losses in a cost effective way, reducing the anxiety and uncertainty regarding unmitigated risk, compliance with the legal obligations related to risk management, ensuring business continuity post loss, allowing partial or full operations to resume, and maintaining EPS by minimizing financial disruption. Thereafter saw the comparison between traditional risk management versus the enterprise risk management. Enterprise risk management is relatively the modern method or modern approach of the risk management. So traditional risk management was all while silo based and stovepipe approach was considered. Each function was required to manage their risk independently, and each silo leader was responsible for managing their own risk. So marketing risk, finance manager, marketing risk always covered with the risk associated with the sales and customer relationship. My finance manager was all while responsible and handling financial risk overlapping with the treasurer who manages financing and cash flow risk. Chief operating officer was required to manage risk related to production distribution. So thus the approach lacked cross-functional coordination, leading to risk oversight gaps and inefficiencies. And therefore the emergence of enterprise risk management came. So obviously it is not explicitly mentioned that enterprise risk management is an alternative to traditional risk management, but it is implied that it is an alternative, because ERM has a holistic and integrated approach towards risk management across the organization. The risks are viewed collectively rather than in silos, and this ERM encourages collaboration and centralized risk oversight to improve strategic decision making, which is often led by a chief risk officer or a designated risk management team. So this is how the dashboard of ERM looks like: finance and treasury, production and distribution bucket, human resources bucket, sales and customer centric or services, legal and compliance risk, and technology risk. So these are the 6 buckets within which the enterprise risk management is assessed. The limitations in traditional risk management which are countered by the ERM are like risk gaps between the silos, overlapping risks amongst the various silos, isolated risk responses, limited external focus, weak connection to strategy, and hence the shift to enterprise risk management has happened, wherein holistic approach is managed across the entire organization, which ensuring all risks are covered collectively. Proactive strategies involved, It anticipates beforehand the risk and thereby manages the risk before they become critical issues, and thus it is aligned and supports the strategic goals. The elements of enterprise risk management strategy: objective setting, risk identification, risk assessment, risk response, and communication and monitoring continuously. We saw the COSO framework. So Committee of Sponsoring Organizations came up with a paper or a document in 2004, which is called as the initial COSO framework was introduced, and in that the risk response strategies were avoidance, reduction, transfer and acceptance. It also included monitoring and internal control. It had a focus of value creation, and however, there are certain misconceptions about ERM which were clarified in the 2017 COSO document. So ERM is not a function or a department as such. It is more than a risk listing. It is beyond internal control and it's not a part of internal audit only. It is not a checklist. It is applicable to all organizations. So these were the misconceptions which were there about ERM. Then we went through the definition of ERM. ERM focuses on the negative impacts of events as risk, but that prevents value creation and erode existing value. Positive impacts are that it counterbalances the negative impacts and represent opportunities. ERM is a process driven by the board, management and personnel across the organization. It is applied in strategy setting and enterprise-wide decision making. It aims to identify the potential risks that could affect the entity. It ensures risks may remain within the organization's risk appetite, and it provides a reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of organizational objectives. Thereafter, we saw the key aspects of ERM as an integrated framework in 2004. It is an ongoing process. It is managed by experts. So there is a specific enterprise risk manager who closely assesses the various risk situations and understands its implications. Strategic integration has to be there with the other departments. Enterprise-wide approach should be taken, and therefore it takes a portfolio view at risk at the entity level. Proactive risk identification has to be done. ERM identifies potential risk events and aligns them with the organization's risk tolerance. Alternative to silo-based risk management. The COSO framework had 4 categories of entity objectives: strategic, operations, reporting and compliance. So managing risk across these categories within the entity's risk appetite helps create stakeholder value. So the integrated approach established a direct relationship between the 4 objectives, that is strategic, operations, reporting and compliance, and the 8 components which included internal environment, objective setting, event identification, risk assessment, risk response, control activities, information and communication, and monitoring. The third dimension represents the interrelationship of objectives and components across various entity levels. So this is how the cube or the grid looks like of COSO ERM model. Thereafter, we started looking into the various aspects of risk management, which included risk pooling. So pooling of risk in insurance is done. Then we went through pooling of risk in supply chain management, how risk is managed in supply chain management by way of pooling. Inventory management was the best, are the benefits out of risk pooling in supply chain. Warehouse location and product flow in transportation was reduced, and product designing simplified the forecasting by limiting product variations. Then we saw the positive and negative impacts of risk pooling. The positive impacts were that it increased the service level, it reduced the overhead and safety stock cost, it improved operational efficiency also. The negative impacts were there that it landed up with higher transportation costs due to increased distance, longer lead times and limited alternatives in case of disruptions. Diversification. So we saw risk diversification in consonance with the portfolio management. So based on the principle of not putting all eggs in one basket is the principle which is followed in diversification. So diversification is a risk management strategy used by investors to minimize the risk by spreading the investments across multiple assets and across multiple industries. Then we saw the types of risks that are associated with portfolio. Unsystematic risks, which are firm specific, and there are systematic risks which are market related risks. The mathematics of portfolio diversification was introduced by Harry Markowitz in 1952 through its modern portfolio theory, wherein quantification of was required to be done of how correlations between the investments reduce the overall portfolio risk, and in that model the correlation should range between -1 to +1. So the essence of diversification was to select securities that are negatively correlated to minimize the overall risk. Then we saw certain takeaways of diversification, wherein diversification reduces the portfolio risk but cannot eliminate the systematic risk. A well diversified portfolio should include 25 to 30 securities, thereby achieving optimal risk reduction, and negative correlation between the assets is crucial for effective diversification. Then we came to an important concept of risk analysis in risk management. So risk analysis involves assessment of potential risk in a project, examining their probability and consequences. So benefits of risk analysis involved avoiding potential litigation, addresses the regulatory compliances, then ensuring adherence to the new legislation, reduces the exposure to risk, minimizes potential negative impacts, and aids in decision making to all project management stages. We saw various methods of risk analysis, which included qualitative methods which are based on judgment and experience. Then we saw semi-quantitative methods which involve risk classification, high, medium, low. Then we saw quantitative methods which were like assigning numerical values to risk. Thereafter we specifically saw the risk analysis tools and techniques, bow tie analysis, wherein it identified the causes and consequences of the risk. It helped create a risk mitigation strategy. Another tool was the risk analysis matrix, wherein the risks were classified based on the likelihood and severity, and risk prioritization was required for effective mitigation. Risk register is another tool and technique where all potential risks are documented during project execution, and specific responsibilities are assigned for risk strategy mitigation. SWIFT was another tool which involves structured what-if technique. Another quantitative risk analysis involved Monte Carlo simulation, wherein randomly assigned values to variables to generate different risk scenarios. So it performs multiple iterations to simulate a real-life risk, provides statistical insights, mean variance, standard deviation, widely used in financial risk management and portfolio analysis. So the key takeaways in risk analysis tools and techniques are that risk analysis help in proactive risk management, combining qualitative and quantitative methods and thereby ensuring accuracy. So Monte Carlo simulation is a powerful tool for risk-based decision making. A structured approach ensures risks are prioritized and mitigated effectively. Risk mapping, then we saw as a risk management important concept. Risk mapping is a key component of risk assessment. It visually represents potential risk based on the impact and probability. We saw thereafter the key aspects of risk mapping, which included identification, quantification, and prioritization of the risks affecting the organizational objectives. Over here, the two dimensions or matrix is used, x-axis and y-axis. X-axis, if you see, represented impasse severity, and y-axis represented the likelihood or occurrence. So the four buckets of risk mapping were high risk, which means high likelihood plus high impact, and low risk means low likelihood plus low impact. Medium risk included high likelihood and low impact, and low likelihood and high impact. So the risk response is based on the assessment, included avoidance, whereby eliminating those activities that exposes the organization to high risk, avoid those activities which are likely to put the organization into high risk. Mitigation, over here it is intended to implement strategies to reduce the risk impact or frequency. Transfer means shifting the risk to third parties, which means hedging or insurance. Acceptance means acknowledging the risk, accepting it and bearing the consequences if at all it occurs. This structured assessment helps organization effectively manage and prioritize the risks. So this is how the risk mapping or the risk exposure assessment and response. The risk categorization based on the risk map. These are the four categories which are there. Then we covered the importance of risk mapping, which included understanding the risk environment. It helped prioritizing the mitigation strategies and thereby reduce the insurance cost. Few other aspects of risk mapping also we saw. It enhances the collaboration between the risk function and other departments. It encourages strategic decision making based on the risk factor. It improves risk management and governance effectiveness. It clarifies risk appetite and tolerance for the enterprise. It integrates risk management activities across all functions and provides a common risk language for better communication. Risk mapping process. So this involved visual tool, then risk register creation, risk assessment, color coding, heat map plotting, wherein top 10 risks are identified are visually represented on a heat map. Risk categorization is done on the color scheme. Green, turquoise, blue zone means lower moderate risk, requires minimal focus. Orange zone means medium risk, requires specific attention. And red zone means high risk, demands immediate focus from top management. So thus risk mapping helps the decision making process and prioritizing the risk mitigation efforts. However, there are certain disadvantages because there is a subjectivity in scoring, inability to differentiate the probabilities, lack of multidimensional representation, scaling issues are there, financial loss may be very high for small businesses but very low for large corporate entities. And then last disadvantage is the lack of cost effectiveness evaluation. Then came to an important concept last as risk indicators and key risk indicators. So risk indicators helps identify and monitor and mitigate the risk within the risk management framework. So KRIs are required to be identified. So the most important are risk indicators focusing on critical risks that can significantly impact an organization. So KRIs act as early warning signals allowing proactive risk mitigation. We saw thereafter the importance of risk KRIs. Then the various functions of effective KRIs are to identify major risk, quantify risk and their impact, provide comparisons and benchmarks, facilitates regular risk reporting and monitoring, alert key stakeholders in advance of potential risk, and support risk management and mitigation strategies. Thereafter, we saw the comparison between KRIs and KPIs as key performance indicators. KPIs measures business performance, whereas KRIs measures the risk exposure. And the classic example of KPIs are the revenue growth and staff engagement, and KRIs is the cyber attack vulnerability and the decline in the market share. So just to understand the concept, there are certain examples of comparison. So IT performance is the KPI, whereas cyber attack risk is the KRI. Market share growth is the KPI and risk of losing customer is the KRI. Staff engagement is the KPI versus the risk of losing key employees is the KRI. Thereafter we saw the features of KRIs, which included measurable KRIs, predictive KRIs and informative KRIs. Types of KRIs included financial KRIs, people KRIs and operational KRIs. The effectiveness of KRIs involved lastly that the KRI should align with the KPIs and strategic goals. Each KRI should be linked to a KPI performance measure to be effective. Specific predictive and quantifiable KRI should be used, monitor regularly, some require real-time tracking and others periodic review. And lastly, KRIs and KPIs should be reviewed regularly for continued relevance. So with this, we are done with the chapter 1 of the module 4, which is about risk management. In the next session, we will take up the corporate risk management. So that's the next chapter which is there. Yeah. So CRM, that is a corporate risk management. So we'll stop for the day. Rakesh and Anu, do you have any doubts, queries or any value additions that you want to make or add anything that to the topic? Or should we end for the day?
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah,
Hello.
Rakesh.
No, sir, we are
No,
good.
sir, we are good.
Just
Okay.
one
Just
request,
one
sir.
request, sir.
It is about
It
the
is about the
PPT, and you
PPT,
will
and you will ask me to
ask with
ask with
Deepa madam
Deepa
whether
madam
you
whether
can share
you can
this
share this
PPT.
PPT.
So can you
So
share
can you
Deepa
share
ma'am's
Deepa
number
ma'am's
because I
number
don't
because
have
I
a
don't have
number.
a number.
No, she's there on the group. So the group where I normally post that, okay, I have a session, etc.
Okay.
She's there on the group.
Okay.
Rather, the group has been created by her only. So if not,
Okay,
then
is it-
I'll
okay, is it-
share her number on the group itself after this session.
Okay, sir.
Okay, sir.
So you can check
Maybe
there
I'll have
after.
to have.
Have to have.
Okay, sir.
Okay,
No
sir.
problem.
I'll do that. I'll
Yeah.
do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, Rakesh. So Anu, anything or
Thank
we
you,
can
sir.
end the
Thank you, sir.
session?
She's on mute.
She's on mute.
Okay. Fine. So we'll stop for the day. Thanks, Rajaram. So see you in the next session.